days away from the Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. And you don't just end up in the big game by chance. These teams have been preparing for this moment since the Chiefs held up the Lombardi last season. Each team building up to succeed, free agents, trades, drafts. So how were these teams put together? Well, lucky for us, we have Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman from the With the First Pick podcast, among many other jobs, joining us now. And I want to talk about how these teams are actually put together and constructed. So let's start with Philadelphia. And Ryan, there was one huge free agency signing, a man who is now a finalist for NFL MVP, and that is Saquon Barkley. I would imagine that's the top of your list.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Kenny Pickett trade is what made all the difference for the Eagles on their way to getting to the Super Bowl. 5 days into the Super Bowl, Jenny, 79 days into the draft, and that's where a lot of these players came from. Saquon, of course, was a top 5 pick for the Giants. He was that huge offseason acquisition. He told Giants fans nothing but love last night, so that's great news if you're a Giants fan and getting to see one of your favorite players in the Super Bowl. But I think it speaks to Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM, and Rick has some experience with working with Howie over the years in terms of doing some deals, of his ability to balance both signing players in free agency and finding those guys in the draft. Both the Chiefs and the Eagles have about 60% homegrown players, and that, I mean, the guys they drafted are currently in the roster contributing. And you see some of those big-name players here, and the top 3 guys were elsewhere before finding their way to Philadelphia and balling out. But we know about this draft class as well. The rookies on the defensive side of the ball, they've been absolutely tearing it up starting there in year 1, whether it's Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean. So I think it starts with Saquon, but there's a whole list of players around him that have gotten him to this point. Haven't even mentioned the quarterback yet.
Yeah, Ryan, if you would look at your stats, you know, both of these teams are built the same way. I think the Philadelphia Eagles, 55% of that roster is drafted. 53% of the Kansas City Chiefs is drafted. But what they do is they supplement in free agency and they supplement with big trades. You saw a couple years ago in 2022 to help Philadelphia offense, they went and traded for A.J. Brown, which made a huge difference and got them into the Super Bowl 2 years ago against Kansas City. Now Howie Roseman makes a big signing in free agency to get Saquon Barkley, but they struck gold with Bond, the linebacker, and they also hit Becton, the throwaway from the New York Jets, is playing really well at guard right now. So not only are they doing very well in the draft and getting key players in the draft, the Philadelphia Eagles, but they're also hitting in free agency and in their trades.
I want to hone in on that draft again. Would you say 79 days away from the upcoming draft? So we're going to have to see what comes through that. But you just mentioned some of the success that they had in that draft last season. Mitchell, DeJean, they really shored up that secondary. What has surprised you the most from those two, Ryan?
The fact that you can put 2 rookies out there in the secondary, one on the outside and one in the slot, and they playing like grizzled veterans. And that pick at number 94 is a young man, Jalen Hunt, we saw down at the Senior Bowl a year ago. He's a former safety, and I thought this pick was a little rich. Apparently, Howie Roseman knows more than I do because he is a situational pass rusher who has made an impact in year 1. And it just goes to show, if you get the picks right, it can help you. And the first and second rounders are pretty easy. But when you get the picks right on day 2 and day 3, and they can supplement what you do on the field, either as backups or eventual starters, that can make all the difference in the world. And while the Chiefs struggled a little bit with this draft class in 2024, it hasn't quite yet come to fruition. That 2022 class is a critical reason they're here. Trent McDuffie, one of the best players in the league. George Karlaftis, the edge rusher. Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round. So those things taken together in terms of hitting on the first rounders and even the second rounders, and then getting guys on day 3 is why it's so critically important to make sure you know what you're doing in the old draft there, Rick.
Yeah, well, if you look at, let's take the Philadelphia Eagles. They went out and hired a new defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Right now, they're first in total defense, second in scoring defense, and first in pass defense. And a lot of it has to do with them addressing the secondary with their first 2 picks. What's amazing is Cooper DeJean was able to come in, learn that defense, play multiple positions, and has a major impact along with Quinyon Mitchell. If you flip over to the Kansas City, you go back to that 2022 draft, the year they went to the Super Bowl, they got 5 starters out of that draft class and a lot from the secondary. So they can let a Ladarius Sneed go. They can let some of these veterans go and yet replace them with younger, cheaper version. And McDuffie, I'd argue, if not the best, one of the best corners in the league right now.
You guys are really kind of downplaying the Chiefs draft last year. You're not going to give Xavier Worthy some love? Nothing?
Well, let me take that.
So here's the thing.
Now, you shut.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
Here, just 1 second. Okay. That's going to be a big to-do because Kansas City traded with Buffalo. Last week, you seen Xavier Worthy have a bigger impact than Keon Coleman in that game. So that's going to be a comparison all the time. Xavier Worthy has brought speed to that offense, something they didn't have. In fact, Kansas City, all their starting receivers, that starting group, the trade with DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown now, who is healthy, all were acquired this year. So they attack one of their weaknesses on the offensive side of the ball. Xavier Worthy is getting better as a route runner, but there's no question about the speed and the way they use him as a gadget type guy. Try to get the ball in his hands, let him go do what he does once he gets the ball in his hands. So he's been an excellent addition for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, Jenny, the only thing I would add is that their plan wasn't for Xavier to be the number one because they had Rashee Rice, who they had a lot of faith in, and he missed much of the season with injury as well. And then Rick talked about the Hollywood Brown and Hopkins acquisitions. So Xavier was asked to do a lot probably sooner than they expected. They didn't hit on the tackle in the second round, Kingsley Sumatea, so they moved Joe Tooney from left guard to left tackle, and they got to figure that out. But in terms of the 2022 draft class, this one, it hasn't quite lived up to those expectations because that was a Hall of Fame draft class for Brett Veach.
Worthy is, though, holding the record for most touchdowns by a Chiefs rookie from scrimmage, so definitely stepped up when they needed him the most in that situation. The Chiefs also building up this team, going for that three-peat through trades as well. Some were already mentioned, but which trades had the biggest impact on the success that they found this season so far, Ryan?
I think, that's an interesting question. Is it Dre Hopkins? He's been good but not great for the Chiefs. It feels like they were sputtering offensively till about 2/3 of the way through the season, and then you looked up and they're doing what the Chiefs usually do in December and into January. Of course, that starts with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But I think Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, deserves a ton of credit too. Rick talked about the Ladarius Sneed trade, which they sent him to Tennessee, and they were able to do that because of that young depth there. So I don't know if they've had any trade that's gone out, that's been a home run in terms of turning their season around because of the veterans they have in that locker room. I think on the other side, they got rid of the edge rusher that they sent to the Jets, and they had guys come in and play well. I think the Saquon Barkley signing is obviously the obvious one. And, jokes aside, Kenny Pickett came in and was quarterback for a game or two. That was via trade. If you want to mark that up as a win for the Eagles, I'll let you do that.
Oh, my God. Get rid of the Pittsburgh bias, will you please? There's 31 other teams in the league as well. There wasn't a really, Jenny, if you look at it, a significant impact from a trade standpoint. Jahan Dotson, who they traded, Philadelphia traded for, tried to get another slot receiver in there. But this whole Philadelphia offense, and Kellen Moore, give him credit for what he's done. They're not having to put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands and throwing it 50 times a game. They're the #1 rushing defense or offense in the NFL, and that's a lot to do with Saquon Barkley. So there are some subtle trades that happen to help them get to where they're at, but there's no bigger addition than Saquon Barkley for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Going back to the Chiefs momentarily here, and you talk about free agents as well playing a role to get to this Super Bowl. Now, if you think about restructuring Chris Jones' contract, and Rick, you also mentioned just signing Hollywood Brown. What kind of impact will he have on this Super Bowl run?
I don't think if we know what the impact he'll have yet, because he's just getting back. He missed the whole season predominantly with that sternum injury that he had this year. So, but he's an explosive playmaker. And I remember playing against him a few times when he was with the Baltimore Ravens. There's no question he's going to give him a vertical threat down the seam. I think the healthier he's getting, the more he's going to be involved in this offense. If you can get the ball in his hands quickly, like a Tyreek Hill, not saying he's a Tyreek Hill, but he has that electric speed to do some special things when the ball is in his hands after the catch.
Fellas, we're just 5 days away from the big game. Ryan Wilson, Rick Spielman getting us ready for the Super Bowl. Fellas, thank you so much. You just said 79 days away from the 2025 NFL Draft. Are we already talking about that? I feel like let's get through this weekend first, and then we can focus on that. But don't worry, if you want to discuss that and much more, check out With the First Pick. Those guys will get you up to date on everything you need to know about this upcoming draft class and also getting you ready for the big game.